Hi, this is Nairi from Fly Little Birds, and today we're going to be talking about curiosity in PACE. P-A-C-E. PACE is a therapeutic parenting method. It's very, very popular, and it stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity and empathy. And if you check out my channel, you'll see I've already done a video on empathy. I don't know whether I started with that one because I feel like it's easier, I don't know, but we're on curiosity today. Quick shout out to Mary and Christine. Thank you so much for joining my membership and supporting my channel. So, curiosity. Curiosity is probably my favourite out of the four. That's probably the one that I've used the most and I feel like I've benefited from the most. So my sons are now 13 and 14 years old, my adopted sons, and I've fostered before, so often used curiosity. So let's talk about how you're going to use it as a parent, as a therapeutic parent. What methods are you going to use? How is it going to happen in everyday life? And I will definitely give you examples of the way that I use it. And then let's talk about the children and how they use curiosity back and how you can see it developing in them. So first of all, often with children that are adopted, fostered, have experienced childhood trauma, or children that have significant family difficulties, you don't always know what it is they're thinking, what it is they're feeling, and why certain behaviours and attitudes happen. And the biggest mistake that I think we can make as therapeutic parents is to not ask the questions and be afraid of perhaps the answers sometimes. I know that when I was fostering, I used to be very confused about disclosures and how much I could ask and how much I couldn't ask. And it almost got to the point where you were afraid to ask anything. So if a child disclosed something to you, you were afraid to ask them to clarify it, because then, you know, it would look like you are leading them and you're leading them into sort of an idea. And of course you do have to be careful of that with curiosity. You can over ask and you can be over curious and not know when to stop or know when it's going too far. So you do have to have that caveat on there. But I'm a firm believer in, if you want to know how your child is feeling, if you want to know why your child has done something, then ask them. One of the sides of that is the child may not actually answer you, may not actually give you an answer, or may give you a false answer. But in my experience, children are generally quite honest. If they want to tell you something, they will just tell you as it is. And you can normally tell when it's a made-up answer because they've got to think about it for a long period of time. One example I have for you is my younger son seemed to be spending an awful long time in the toilet. Now, I know that's a very odd thing to say, but when they've been in there for over half an hour and you're getting the same answer back, like I'm going to the toilet, stop disturbing me, and you need to be curious, don't you? Because why does somebody need to spend that long in the toilet? Why do they need to spend that long in the toilet? And actually, I wish I'd been more curious and asked more questions and stood outside the toilet and waited till he came out, because what I found when I emptied the bin in the toilet, which is not really a bin, it's like a small thing, more for ladies' products than anything else, I found it full of snack wrappers. And if you're wondering whether the boys are allowed to have snacks, the answer to that is yes. Do they have enough snacks? Yes. They have way too many snacks. If anything, I need to sort out the situation that I have with the snack box. In fact, I've been moving it around the kitchen so that somebody doesn't take 20 snacks out in one go in one day. Now, both of my boys are actually very slight. They're very slender boys. However, with the amount of sugar that they are intaking at the moment, that's going to change. So yes, if I'd been more curious and actually stuck with my gut instinct that something wasn't quite right, I would have found out that actually these long episodes in the toilet are because somebody is munching their way through lots of chocolate snacks in there. And but that's just a silly one, okay? I'll give you some more serious ones. So if we have an angry outburst or a meltdown, and this happens quite a lot with my younger son, and my other son has extreme anxiety. So if I don't ask the questions, that anxiety or that anger is going to develop and develop and develop because I've not actually got to the bottom of what is going on with them. For example, with my younger son, I might wait until he's calmed down a little bit, or I might not be able to. I might actually have to start being curious in the middle of a meltdown. And when there's a breath, when there's a pause, I'll be saying, do you want to talk about it? The answer to that will be no. I don't want to talk about it. So I have to wait for my opportunity. And often with curiosity, you do have to wait for the right time. You can't always sit down and start asking questions to your child, especially if they're not in a good place. And it's not always appropriate. There might be people around. That often happens in our house. We've got family around. I can't ask the questions then. I might have to ask them later. But at some point, I'm going to sit down and say, why are you having extreme anger at the moment? What is going on? And when one of my sons was younger, I could not get anywhere with that. I used to use the Treasure Deck series of cards, which are emotion cards, and that would help me a little bit. But there's nothing quite like you spending time having a hug and saying, I think there's something wrong. Let me start guessing. So this is the next thing about it. First thing to say about curiosity, you've got to be prepared to ask the questions and not be afraid of the answers. And sometimes in the most difficult situations. The second thing about it is curiosity. You don't know the answer. And again, we can be afraid to ask questions in case we're wrong. And as parents, we lack confidence to actually go with our instinct. Now, you may well be wrong, okay? You may have a few guesses on things and you may find that you're completely wrong. And that's happened to me many times. But when you're wrong, often your children will tell you. So if I say to my son, oh, you're extremely angry, is it to do with the fact that you saw your brother with that gift and you didn't have that gift? If I'm right on that, he'll probably go quiet, or he'll go, and I'm like, okay. And then I've got to weigh in, haven't I? If I'm wrong with that, he'll just say no right away. He'll say, no, don't be silly, it's not that. And then I can ask more questions. And you will get to know your child really well, what the things are that are most likely to cause them distress. And in our family, it's friendships and it's school. And often my other children, my birth children, might say to me, they might guess why they think our children are unsettled. And they may say, oh, maybe it was because of this, mum, or that. And I'll bet you anything you like that the most likely reason is there was a friendship problem at school. So I already know, because I've had my boys for many, many years. I've had them from their age 2 and 3 as foster children, and now they're 13 and 14. I know that a lot of it will be around friendships and relationship building and just not being able to do that with ease at school and struggling with that. Much more than the academic side, much more than that. You have to keep asking the questions and you will start to see a pattern as you become more curious. Now, the flip side on that is you can become irritating. I think I'm quite irritating. My husband doesn't ask as many questions as me. I think they sometimes get away with more with him. But at the end of the day, you don't want to sound like a parrot asking question after question after question, or use curiosity all of the time. And this is the thing about pace, you cannot use it all of the time. You don't always have time to be curious. You don't always have time to be playful, accepting and empathetic. Sometimes you've got to get in there and it's got to be straight down the line. This needs to stop, or we need to put this in place. You can't always use it, but as curious as you can be, you'll get more answers, you'll get more ways in of helping your children deal with their emotions. So let's flip that around and let's talk about children's curiosity, shall we? Now, if you've seen a child with what I would call normal development for their age, so the milestones that you would expect to see when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, you will notice that children are generally very, very curious. From the age of perhaps 2, the question that they always ask is why. They ask why about everything, and when they're 3 and when they're 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. Why? Why does that work? How does that work? Why does that work? They're curious and they're asking questions about how things are in the world. Now, my experience of the boys is definitely less curious, less questions asked, but not less repetitive. So when I say less curious, I mean less curious for the things that matter. So less curious about someone's emotions and why they're reacting in a certain way. Curious and repetitive around facts. When is dinner going to happen? Why is that routine different? When we're going out somewhere, when are we going to eat? Where are we going to go? Who are we going to see? So it's questions and curiosity around routines, people that they know, and facts. It's not so much curiosity around emotion and feelings and imagination. And so there's a huge gap there. because it's almost like the children don't know to ask those questions. They're not having the empathy. I've already talked about this on another video, to understand how someone's thinking and feeling. So they don't necessarily, they might look at someone crying, I mean they're in their teens now, and go, why is that happening? But as younger children, they probably wouldn't have. They would have just seen it, unless they thought there was foul play with a parent, which would then trigger their previous experiences. They probably wouldn't ask the questions, they would just recoil. And so often with children, you are being their curiosity for them. You're looking at a situation and you're saying, oh, I wonder how that animal got hurt, or I wonder how that child ended up in that situation. I wonder why there's a big queue there when there isn't normally. You ask the questions for your children because they're not going to ask them. They may be repetitive and ask lots of questions around the same stuff, generally stuff that's called them triggers of childhood, but there's lots of curiosity missing. There's lots of questions missing that I saw in my own children, and as a nursery owner with lots of children coming through, lots and lots of questions be happening in the rooms around the 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds all the time. Questions: how does that work? How is that made? Why is that person crying? Who's that new person here today working with us? That doesn't so much happen with my boys, and it's only really happening now as they're getting older. So curiosity develops later with them, just like empathy does, and you're going to have to fill in a lot of the gaps for them and be as vocal as you want to be. I think for some of us as well, sometimes we go into ourselves when we lack confidence, parenting or any otherwise, and we stop asking the questions. We stop chatting about things. We stop trying to fill in the gaps. We get tired, we get run down, and we just can't kind of be bothered sometimes. But the more that we put ourselves out there, the more that we will get back, the more understanding we will get around our children. So I hope that helps you. Check out channel membership, which is there if you'd like to, because that might really benefit you. And I'll see you on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.